The night was quiet, too quiet for a world that once carried laughter and voices. The colony had fallen years ago, and now only a few humans lived scattered in broken homes. One of them was David, a man who had grown used to silence. He lived. Alone in a small house made from old stone and metal, his days were simple, fixing tools, gathering water, and trying to survive. He rarely spoke to anyone because there was no one left nearby. But that night, something strange happened. A sound broke the silence, a weak knock on his door. At first he thought it was the wind. He waited, holding his breath, then it came again. 3 soft knocks, uneven, trembling. David stood frozen. His hand reached for the old rifle near the wall. No one had knocked on his door in years. Visitors on this ruined colony usually meant trouble. He walked slowly, each step echoing in the empty house. His heart beat faster. He opened the door just enough to peek outside. What he saw was not what he expected. A young alien woman stood there. Her skin was pale with faint glowing patterns running across her arms. Her eyes were wide, frightened, and tired. She looked like she had not eaten in days. Her clothes were torn, her hands shaking. She pressed them together as if begging. Before he could speak, she whispered in a broken voice, "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." Her words were not a request. They were a promise. She repeated them again, her lips trembling. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." David felt a strange chill. The way she spoke was not normal. It sounded like she had said these words many times before, as if they were her only value. Her eyes pleaded with him. She was not demanding, she was begging. For a moment, he considered. Closing the door, she was an alien. He did not know her kind, and danger followed strangers, but something in her face stopped him. Her tears caught the moonlight, and he could see the weight of pain she carried. She was not lying. She was desperate. "Who are you?" David asked. His voice was careful, low. She shook her head quickly as if afraid to answer. She only whispered the same words again. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." David looked past her into the night. The empty road, the broken fences, the shadows moving in the wind. Whoever she was, she had come from somewhere. And maybe she was running from someone. If he let her in, he might bring trouble to himself. If he left her outside, she might not live until morning. The silence stretched. Only the sound of the cold wind filled the space between them. The woman lowered her head, her voice almost gone now. "Please," she whispered. "Just one night." David's grip on the door tightened. He was a man who had chosen isolation, yet his heart was not made of stone. He saw her thin arms, her shaking body, her hope fading with each second. Slowly he opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. Her eyes widened, as if she could not believe the words. She stepped forward quickly, almost stumbling. She crossed the threshold like someone escaping from death. Once inside, she stood still, waiting, as if expecting him to order her or push her away. David closed the door and watched her. She did not sit until he nodded. She did not speak again. She only sat quietly, folding her hands in her lap. Her glowing patterns flickered faintly, like fading stars. The room felt different now. For years it had been empty, only his footsteps filling it. Now there was another presence, fragile and quiet. The air carried her fear, but also something else, a mystery. David placed the rifle back against the wall. His mind turned with questions. Who was she? Why had she come here? And why did she keep saying those strange words? He looked at her again, her tired eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time in years, David felt something stir inside him. Not fear, not anger, but curiosity. The knock on the door had changed his night and perhaps his life. The woman whispered one last time before silence took the house. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." Her voice cracked, and a tear slid down her cheek. David did not answer. He only stared at her, knowing that this night was the beginning of something he could not yet understand. The house was never truly warm, but compared to the cold outside, it felt like shelter. The alien woman sat near the small fire David had built earlier. Her hands were close to the flames, but she did not stretch them fully, as if she feared taking too much heat. She kept her back straight, her head lowered. She moved carefully, like someone who had been punished for every mistake. David watched her in silence. He poured a little water into a metal cup and gave it to her. She took it with both hands, bowing her head quickly. She drank in small sips, not daring to empty it at once. Her glowing patterns flickered with each breath. "You hungry?" David asked after a long pause. She looked up for a second, then nodded quickly. Her lips pressed together, she did not speak. He gave her a piece of stale bread and a bit of dried meat. She held it as if it was a treasure. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone afraid the food might be taken away. As she ate, David noticed the scars on her wrists, thin and old. He also saw fresh marks, red lines that looked like rope burns. His chest grew heavy. Whoever she had escaped from had not treated her kindly. She finished the food and placed the plate neatly beside her, her hands folded in her lap again. She sat still, waiting for his next word. David frowned. He had not lived with anyone for years, but even he could see this was not normal. She was not resting. She was behaving like a servant waiting for orders. "Why do you keep saying those words?" he asked finally. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent. What do they mean to you?" Her shoulders shook slightly, but she kept her eyes on the floor. For a long time, she did not answer. Only the fire cracked, filling the silence. At last, she whispered, "It is what they wanted. If I said it, they gave me food. If I said it, they let me live another day." David's jaw tightened. The way she spoke told him enough. She had lived like property, not a person. Someone had broken her voice until only those words remained. "You don't have to say that here," he said. His tone was firm, but quiet. "This is my house. No one will hurt you here." For the first time, she lifted her eyes and looked at him fully. Her gaze was sharp, but uncertain, as if she was testing his words. After a moment, she lowered her head again. She whispered, "Then, what should I say?" David felt a sting in his chest. She was not asking with sarcasm. She was truly lost. She did not know how to exist outside of commands and survival. He sighed, standing up. He walked to the shelf, pulled out a small pot, and gave it to her. "If you want to cook, then cook because you want to, not because you have to," he said. She held the pot with trembling hands, staring at it as though it was something strange. Slowly, she moved to the fire, added a little water, and began to prepare a simple stew with the few supplies left. David sat back and watched. She worked, quietly, every movement careful, precise. She cut roots with steady hands, stirred with patience. When the smell of stew filled the room, she placed a bowl in front of him and one for herself. She waited until he took the first spoon before she touched her own. The food was plain, but warm. David ate slowly, watching her. She seemed calmer while cooking, as if the act gave her purpose. Yet her eyes never fully relaxed. Each sound outside made her stiffen. Each shift of shadow made her glance at the door. When the meal was done, she cleaned the bowls without a word. She wiped the floor, folded the cloth, checked the fire. Only, when every small task was done, did she sit back down. David leaned against the wall, staring at her. She was in his house, eating his food, cooking his meal. But she acted as though she was invisible, as though she was afraid to take space. He wanted to ask more, but he stopped. He could see that questions would only press her further into fear. The night deepened, wind howled outside, and the old boards creaked. The woman curled up in a corner, resting her head on her knees. She did not ask for a blanket. She did not move closer to the fire. She only folded herself small, like someone used to sleeping wherever she could. David lay on his bed, but sleep did not come quickly. He kept glancing at her, the stranger who had knocked on his door. The words she carried haunted him. "I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." They told a story without details, a story of chains, fear, and survival. And though she was silent now, her silence was louder than any scream. The storm outside grew stronger. Rain lashed against the broken walls and the wind whistled through the cracks in the roof. David sat awake by the dim fire, while the alien woman stayed curled up in her corner. For hours, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain filled the silence. When lightning flashed across the window, David saw her trembling. Her shoulders shook, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She looked as if the storm outside was not just weather, but a memory she was reliving. He wanted to speak, but he held his tongue. For days he had lived with silence, yet tonight, silence felt heavier than words. At last, she whispered something, so soft he almost missed it. "They will find me." David leaned forward. "Who will find you?" he asked, his voice steady, calm. She lifted her head, her glowing patterns dim like fading embers. Her lips trembled. "The masters," she said, "the ones I ran from." Her voice cracked as she spoke, as if each word was dangerous. David waited, giving her space. Finally, she took a deep breath and the story began to spill. "I was taken when I was young," she said. "My people, we were not fighters. We were farmers, singers, healers. We lived in the valley and we thought no one cared for us. But ships came, dark ships with hunters. They marked us as property. They said we were weak, so we would serve." David clenched, his fists. He had heard stories of such raids, but hearing it from her lips made his chest burn. She continued, her eyes fixed on the fire. "They gave me 3 choices: cook, clean, or be silent. If I did these things, I was useful. If I failed, they hurt me. If I cried, they punished me. If I spoke without permission, they starved me. So I learned to repeat the words before they could ask. I can cook, I can clean, I can be silent." Her hands shook as she pressed them together. "It kept me alive, but it killed something inside me too." David sat still, the firelight flickering across his face. He wanted to interrupt, to tell her she was safe now, but he knew she needed to release the weight she carried. "They wore collars of metal and whips of light," she went on. "I scrubbed floors until my skin bled. I cooked meals that I was never allowed to taste. I cleaned the same hall again and again until my bones ached. And when I was silent, truly silent, they forgot I was there. That was safest, to be invisible." A tear slid down her cheek, glowing faintly in the firelight. "I escaped because one of them grew careless. A door left open, a ship left unguarded. I ran until my legs gave out. I hid in the ruins until the night swallowed me. Then I walked and walked until I saw your light." Her eyes finally met his, wide and filled with fear. "But they will come. They always come. They hunt what they believe is theirs." David's chest tightened. He had lived alone for years, keeping away from trouble. But now trouble had come knocking, not with weapons, but with a girl broken by cruelty. He felt anger rise within him. Anger at the faceless hunters who thought lives were property. "You are not theirs," David said firmly. His voice cut through the storm. "You are not property. Not here. Not anymore." She shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. If they find me, they will hurt you too. They will take me back. They will make me worse than before. Please send me away before it happens." David stood, his shadow tall against the firelight. "I will not send you away," he said. "You knocked on my door. That means you are under my roof, and under my roof, no one will chain you again." The woman's lips parted, disbelief written on her face. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had claimed her safety as their own. For a long moment, she only stared at him, and then her tears fell faster. The storm raged outside, but inside something had shifted. She was no longer just a silent guest. She was someone with a voice, a story, a soul. And David knew that by opening his door, he had also opened his life to danger. Still, he did not regret it, not for 1 second. The storm passed by morning, but the house felt heavier, as if the night had left a shadow behind. David woke early. His eyes restless, he stepped outside and scanned the broken road. The air was cold, the ground wet. A mist clung to the ruins like a warning. Inside, the alien woman sat near the fire, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked smaller than before, as if the weight of her story had pressed her down even further. When David stepped back inside, she lifted her head, fear already in her eyes. "They will come," she whispered. "I can feel it." David wanted to tell her she was wrong, but the truth was already written in the silence outside. He had lived alone for years, and he knew when something was watching. The world was too quiet, too still. That evening, as the sky darkened, he saw it. A shadow moving far beyond the old fence. A figure standing where the road bent. Then another, and another. They did not approach, but they did not leave. They watched, waiting. David's hand went to his rifle, his heart pounded. He shut the door quickly and bolted it. The woman saw his face and her body began to tremble. "They found me," she said, her voice breaking. "You must throw me out. If you don't, they will kill you too." David shook his head. "No one is leaving this house. Not tonight, not ever, not like that." She shook harder, her glowing patterns flickering wildly. "You don't understand. They do not stop. They do not forgive. They will break this house and take me back. Please, let me go before it is too late." David crouched in front of her, his voice firm but gentle. "Listen to me. No one who knocks on my door will be thrown out again. If they want to take you, they'll have to go through me first." Her breath caught, her lips parted. She had never heard such words before. Her masters had only spoken of ownership and punishment. But this human spoke of protection, of choice. Outside, the shadows drew closer. Shapes moved in the mist. Slow and steady, David loaded his rifle, the sound echoing through the small room. He checked the windows, sealed the cracks with wooden boards. The fire was dimmed to avoid drawing more light. The woman followed him silently, but her fear was written in every step. Every time a branch cracked outside, she flinched. Her eyes darted to the door as if expecting it to burst open. Hours passed, but the hunters did not strike. They circled, testing. Their voices drifted through the night, low and cruel, speaking in a tongue David did not know. The woman understood, though. Her face turned pale, her hands covering her ears. "What are they saying?" David asked quietly. "They are calling me a runaway," she whispered. "They are laughing. They say they will drag me back in chains and make me serve twice as hard. They say anyone who hides me will be broken too." David's jaw tightened. His grip on the rifle grew firm. He had lived a life of silence, avoiding fights, avoiding people, but something inside him stirred now. He could not stand by while another soul was hunted like an animal. He looked at her, fragile yet glowing faintly in the dark. "They will not take you," he said, his voice steady as stone. "Not while I breathe." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "Why? Why risk yourself for me? You don't even know my name." David paused, realizing she was right. He didn't know her name. She had only been a shadow at his door. But in this moment, she was more than that. She was someone who needed a human to stand for her. "Then tell me your name," he said softly. Her lips parted, and for the first time she spoke without fear. "Leora," she whispered. "My name is Leora." David nodded, the name heavy with meaning. Then Leora, "No one will chain you again." Outside, the hunters began to chant, pounding on the ground with their weapons. The sound shook the air. Leora covered her ears, her body trembling. David stood by the door, rifle in hand, his heart steady. The night stretched long. The hunters were waiting, testing his strength. But David knew the truth. This was only the beginning. They would not stop until they forced their way in, and when that moment came, he would be ready. The night dragged on like a blade held against the skin. Outside, the hunters waited, their shapes circling in the mist. David stood at the door with his rifle. Leora sat trembling by the fire, her glowing patterns flickering like fading stars. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every silence made her shake more. At last, the pounding came. A heavy thud against the door. Dust shook loose from the old beams. David gripped the rifle tighter. His voice was low. "Stay behind me, the one." Pounding came again, followed by a deep voice, cruel and commanding. The words were alien, but the meaning was clear. They were demanding her return. Leora covered her ears, tears spilling down her face. "They want me," she whispered. "They want to drag me back." David's jaw clenched. He stepped closer to the door, his voice steady. "No one is taking you, not while I stand." A harsh laugh answered from outside. The hunters mocked him, calling him a fragile human. They promised to break his bones, to burn his house, to make him beg. David said nothing. His silence was not fear, it was defiance. The door shook again, harder this time. The wood cracked. Leora cried out. She rushed to him, her hands grabbing his arm. "Please, don't fight them. You will die." David looked down at her, her wide eyes filled with terror. He placed a hand over hers. "I would rather die standing than live watching them take you." Her breath caught. Her glowing patterns pulsed brighter for a moment. She stared at him as if she had never seen such strength before. For the first time, something inside her shifted. She was tired of being silent, tired of being invisible. The door crashed open, splinters flying across the room. 3 hunters stepped inside, tall and armored, their weapons humming with strange energy. Their eyes burned with cruel delight as they saw her. One pointed at Leora, shouting. She shrank back, but David moved in front of her, raising his rifle. "Leave," David growled. His voice carried more weight than the rifle. His words were simple, but they shook the air. The hunters laughed. One swung his weapon toward David. The strike would have cut him down, but David fired. The shot echoed through the room. The first hunter staggered, falling to the floor. The others hissed in fury, rushing forward. David fired again, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. One hunter fell back wounded, but the last one reached him, knocking the rifle aside. David stumbled, the weapon skidding across the floor. The hunter raised his glowing blade high. In that moment, Leora screamed. Not a scream of fear, but of defiance. Her voice filled the house like thunder. She grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and struck the hunter. He turned in shock, not expecting resistance from the one he had always seen as property. David recovered quickly, tackling the hunter. The two crashed to the ground, wrestling for the weapon. The glow of the blade lit their faces, sweat and blood mixed as David pushed with all his strength. At last, the blade turned, striking its wielder. The hunter fell silent, his body limp, breathing hard. David rose, bruised and bleeding. Leora rushed to his side, her hands shaking as she touched his arm. "You are hurt," she cried. "Why would you do this for me?" David looked at her, his chest heaving. "Because you are not theirs," he said. "Because no one deserves chains." Her tears fell freely, but her eyes shone with something new. Strength. She stood tall beside him, her glowing patterns brighter than ever. For the first time, she was not hiding behind silence. She was not begging to be useful. She was standing, truly standing. The two remaining hunters outside roared in anger. Their voices carried promises of revenge. Leora looked at David, her hands clenched. "I will not go back," she said, her voice firm. "If they come again, I will fight beside you." David gave a small nod, pride in his eyes. "Then we stand together." The fire burned low. The mist thickened. The night was not over. The danger was not gone. But in that broken house, a new bond had been forged. The lonely human and the broken alien were no longer separate souls. They were something stronger, and when the hunters came again, they would not face one, but two who had chosen to fight. The house smelled of smoke and blood. David leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His arm was bleeding where the hunter's blade had cut him, but his grip on the rifle was still strong. Leora stood close, her glowing patterns brighter than ever. Her eyes were wide, but no longer empty. Outside, the hunters shouted to each other. Their voices carried rage and promises of revenge. 2 had already fallen, but more circled the ruins, waiting for their chance to strike. The night was far from over. David checked his wound quickly. It was deep, blood running down his sleeve. Leora gasped, rushing to him. She tore a strip of cloth from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. Her hands trembled, but she did not pull away. "You should not have done this," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You are hurt because of me." David looked at her, his voice low but steady. "If I had not done it, You would be gone now. I'd rather carry scars than live in silence while they take you back." Her lips parted, her breath caught. She had never heard such words in her life. For so long, her worth had been measured by obedience. But this human spoke of choice, of standing, of freedom. The sound of boots crunched closer. Shadows stretched across the windows. David lifted his rifle again. "They won't stop. Not tonight." Leora's hands tightened on the cloth pressed to his wound. She whispered, "Then, I will not stop either." The door shook violently. A hunter slammed against it, then another. The wood cracked. David raised his weapon. But his strength was fading, his vision blurred. The blood loss was draining him fast. Leora saw it, panic rising in her chest. She looked around the room, her eyes falling on the broken blade from the fallen hunter. She grabbed it with both hands. The weapon hummed with strange energy, heavier than she expected, but she held it firm. The door burst open. 2 hunters stormed inside, their armor shining, their eyes fixed on her. David fired once, dropping one of them. But the recoil knocked him back. His knees buckled. The second hunter charged forward, blade raised. Leora stepped in front of David. Her voice rang through the room. "No more," she cried. She swung the glowing blade with all her strength. The strike cut across the hunter's arm, sparks flying. He roared in fury, swinging back at her. The weapon grazed her side, leaving a burning line of pain. She screamed, but she did not fall. She fought again, striking harder. Her glowing patterns flared like fire. She was no longer silent, no longer invisible. She was alive, defiant. David forced himself up, lifting his rifle one last time. With shaking hands, he fired. The bullet struck true. The hunter staggered, then collapsed. Silence filled the house, broken only by their heavy breaths. Leora dropped. The weapon falling to her knees, her side burned, blood seeping through her torn clothes. David stumbled to her, his hands shaking as he pressed against her wound. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Don't you dare give up now." Her eyes fluttered, her voice weak. "I said I could be silent, but I don't want to be silent anymore." David's throat tightened. He held her close. "Good. Then stay loud. Stay with me." The last shadows outside began to retreat. The hunters had lost too many, and the night was against them. Their voices faded into the mist, promising they would return. Inside the broken house, David and Leora sat in the dark, both bleeding, both scarred, but still alive. The fire flickered low, casting faint light across their faces. For the first time, Leora leaned against him, not out of fear, but out of choice. Her hand rested on his arm, her eyes closing. She whispered, "You fought for me. I fought for you. This is freedom, even if it costs everything." David looked down at her, his chest heavy with pain and pride. He knew the fight was not over. The hunters would come again, stronger, but tonight, they had survived. Tonight, they had chosen to stand together. The cost of freedom was written in blood and scars, but in their hearts it was worth it. The night faded slowly into dawn. The mist began to lift from the broken road. The hunters were gone for now, but their presence lingered like a shadow. David sat by the dying fire, his arm bandaged clumsily, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Beside him, Leora rested, her glowing patterns dim but steady. She stirred as the first light touched the cracked window. Her eyes opened slowly. She winced at the pain in her side, but when she looked at David, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "We are still here," she whispered. David nodded, his voice rough from the long night. "Yes, we are." For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the distant calls of birds returning to the ruins. Life had not disappeared from this world completely. It was fragile, but it endured much. Like them, Leora tried to rise, but David stopped her. "Rest," he said gently. "You're hurt." She shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "I've spent too long resting in fear. I want to move because I choose to, not because they allow me." David studied her face. There was strength there now, hidden before but awakened in the fire of the fight. He helped her stand, careful not to press her wound. Together they moved to the doorway. The world outside was broken, but in the morning light, it seemed less cruel. She breathed deeply, the air cold in her lungs. "When I knocked on your door, I thought I was begging for scraps," she said. "But you gave me more than food. You gave me a reason to stand again." David's chest tightened. He had not expected his life to change when he opened that door. He had been a man of silence, living only to survive. But now he felt something he thought he had lost years ago. Purpose. "You don't need to say you can cook or clean or be silent anymore," he told her. "You only need to say one thing. What do you want?" Her eyes widened at the question. It was something she had never been asked. She thought for a long moment, her glowing patterns pulsing faintly. Then she whispered, "I want to live, not as a servant, not as property, but as myself. And I want to live here with you if you will have me." David felt a warmth spread through his chest. He nodded slowly. "Then live, Leora, not because you must, but because you want to." Tears filled her eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of release. For the first time, she was not asking permission to exist, she was choosing. They spent the day cleaning the damage in the house. David's arm slowed him, but Leora insisted on helping despite her injury. She moved carefully, but her steps were filled with determination. Every action was different now. She was not doing it to prove her worth. She was doing it because it was her choice. When evening came, they sat together by a newly lit fire. The air outside was quiet, but both of them knew the hunters might return. The threat had not vanished, but the fear that once ruled Leora's heart was gone. "If they come back," she said softly, "I will not hide. I will not beg. I will stand beside you again." David looked into her glowing eyes. "And if they come back, they will find two who refuse to kneel." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire crackled gently. The silence was no longer heavy or empty. It was peaceful. It was theirs. As night settled again, Leora leaned against David's shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I knocked on your door, I promised I could be silent. But now, I want you to hear me. Thank you." David's eyes closed for a moment, his heart steady. "No need to thank me," he said quietly. "Just stay. That is enough." Outside, the broken world stretched wide, the ruins of the colony still scarred by war and cruelty. Yet inside, one small house, two souls had found a new beginning. They were not master and servant, not property and owner. They were simply two people, scarred but unbroken, standing together. And for the first time in years, David allowed himself to believe. In tomorrow,